Hi all! This is the plan of my presentation, and in the first part of it, I say what I've been interested in for quite a lot of time, and outline my initial effort to try and solve this puzzle. Then I tell a couple of words about the theoretical concept I've chosen to help me with my understanding what happens, and how I misinterpreted this a very helpful metaphorical thing. Next, I dig a bit deeper into the concept and try to discuss its functions and principles, which in turn have provided me with newly acquired knowledge to apply to solve my puzzle. At the end, I try and evaluate my new understanding, so fasten your seatbelts, here we go. I'd like to start with the assertion that all language learning is a socially constructed process, and the teacher's responsibility is to create a language-rich classroom full of affordances. This accords with my own view of what a classroom ecology should be like, and basically, in order to provide those affordances for my learners and most truly teach and converse at the same time, it is stated in this quote, I usually prepare some prompts for my learners in advance. I thought it's quite important, as activities that aren't scaffolded well often leave students floundering. This is how the board for an intermediate class might look like before a lesson on a sort of shop-till-drop issue. However, what I've noticed is that I get much richer output in terms of structures of vocabulary used in the classroom conversations, whatever topic they are, when I don't give students any prompts on the board, then when I cover the board with a language like this, or structures or functional exponents, whatever. I have to admit I've been puzzled by this for quite a long time. Talk with my colleagues, including those in my online document group I'm a member of, and we've come up with the following possible versions. By priming the students with vocabulary and structures beforehand, I've told them what the right answer is. I'm after all the teacher, so I know everything. Since there is no right answer, there is also a wrong one, and their job as students is to avoid this wrong answer. Therefore, when I provide model answers in a fluency task, I completely subvert it, as the students may perceive the task to be about accuracy. The second idea is that the students even might be obliged to use the words I've written on the board and end up using sort of stilted classroom English instead of going with the natural flow of their conversation. The vocabulary on the board becomes not so much a distraction as a set of unclear instructions, in fact becoming a constraining straitjacket within which the learners follow in my agenda, and they are trapped, unable to freely communicate. The next idea, then, when I predict what words the students might need, I'm in so-called language teaching mode. However, when the students start discussing, it seems as if they focus on the topic they've been given, concentrating on saying what they want to say to get across what they think and feel, really communicating, not doing a language exercise. And they use the language resources they have, whether I predicted them or not, but simple phrases may serve to limit students' grammar and vocabulary, reducing the communicative efficacy of a task. And final idea is that the language on the board is not likely to be as rich and complex as what they've produced, because they can produce, because the interaction in this case is hard to predict more than it is beyond anyone's level. Now, approaching my puzzle from a more theoretical perspective, I've decided to call upon sociocultural theory of mind to revise my understanding of scaffolding, and to help me realize why the prerequisite language doesn't scaffold learners talk in a way I thought it should have. Scaffolding is the temporary support that surrounds a building under construction, and as a metaphorical concept, it was coined by Jerome Bruner to describe the temporary interaction support that is given to learners while their language system is under construction. The better other, for example, a teacher, is responsible for creating an instructional conversation. I mentioned it in the beginning of the presentation. And they do so in order to help the learner to extend their present competence, and then, gradually, the teacher, in Bruner's words, removes the scaffold, part by part, as the reciprocal structure can stand on its own. A number of scholars have tried to approach scaffolding at a more conceptual level. For example, Kasdan develops the Brunner's concept by distinguishing between vertical and sequential scaffolding. Vertical scaffolding comprises asking further questions in order to push the learner in their development. For example, by incremental accumulation of grammar over several assisted turns. Sequential scaffolding involves the adult support while doing a collaborative task, like playing a game. Brunner's ideas about scaffolding are very closely related to Vygotsky's zone of proximal development. Both Brunner and Vygotsky were primarily involved in children's learning and development, but now these terms have been borrowed by the LT profession and used to describe certain aspects of facilitating adult language learning, and see scaffolding as the guidance or structure of an activity to aid students when they can't do it on their own. This is, for instance, the Ellis's definition of scaffolding. More about scaffolding as a theoretical concept can be found in the very last slide, which is bibliography. It's clear from the above that scaffolding is not as simple as the concept of support. When I give my learners language on the board in advance, I aim to facilitate new language acquisition in a supportive way, or at least help them complete the task. In fact, and as the social cultural theory states, there is no real evidence that the learners have appropriated any of my language material. As for the second goal, I've only ever seen scaffolding put up around existing structures. Predicting what language students will need and giving them in advance seems like the equivalent of putting up scaffolding somewhere in the field and hoping a building will then rise up in the middle of it. In accord with it, a lot of research has concluded that the language the students might use is nearly impossible to predict. Therefore, the core of scaffolding is in the interaction, and to optimize learning affordances, I should contribute to the flow of the conversation, elaborating, reformulating, and providing input of appropriate vocabulary at certain moments to enable learners to express and understand new meanings. The crucial point here is that these new meanings is hard to predict in advance. Instead of giving learners new input, whatever form, as a pre-task, I try to work with what they've even imperfectly, or, as is very often the case, inconsistently got. See the cans of stones symbolizing their existing knowledge, and help them build the houses from their own stones. That is, provide them with cognitive crutches to help to build their houses of English. This allows learners to accomplish tasks that they normally wouldn't be able to accomplish on their own. So if not supporting learners to do fluency tasks by any input, then what my role as a teacher should be? Wood, Brunner and Ross made a list of 6 scaffolding functions for a teacher. First is recruiting interest in the task. For example, by running, leading and brainstorming activities to help learners not only get involved, but also weaned from distracting thoughts and actions. Second is reduction in degrees of freedom. This involves simplifying a task for a learner, and the teacher fills the rest of stages to accomplish the task in full. And then lets the learner perfect the components that the teacher managed. Number 3 is direction maintenance. A teacher's role is not to let learners get sidetracked by distracting things, and by the author's words, make it worthwhile for the learner to risk the next step. Number 4 is marking critical features and discrepancies between what has been produced and the ideal solution. I'd call this function as reformulation of students' utterances. It can be used as a correction technique, with the final step for the learner to tell back the improved version of this. Number 5 is frustration control. Proceeding a task, as the author state, should be less dangerous or stressful with tutor than without. And last one is demonstration. I'd call this function recasting, when a teacher provides a model and then asks the students to imitate it. Looking at scaffolding more holistically and rounding off my new understanding of what is going on in the classroom, identifying my puzzle, I'd like to say about 6 principles of scaffolded activity. They've been described in a seminal book by Van Leer, but unfortunately I don't have this book now. But I found them quoted in Kathleen and Bailey, 2006. And the first principle is transfer of control. And what is so attractive to me about the scaffolding is that it is intentionally temporary, and these non-permanent systems in some point must come off. And the scaffolds are gradually dismantled when, for example, the students are able to use the target language effectively, or they learn to take command of the scaffolding on their own, or the processes simply become habit. The second principle is a principle of continuity. Tasks are repeated with variations connected to one another, and the point is that repeated performance with less and less teacher or peer support seems to be at the heart of what scaffolding is all about. A practical example is turning the similar task into a piece of writing. Contextual support, as opposite to decontextualized focus on forms practice. Here, exploration is encouraged in a safe and supportive environment, and access to means and goals is promoted in a variety of ways. Next principle is principle of intersubjectivity, mutual engagement, encouragement, non-threatening participation. The next principle is principle of contingency. Tasks procedures depend on actions of learners, and contributions are oriented towards each other. Conversation is all about repetition, into which, as Van Leer says, we embed the new and the surprising, and it is this contingency which makes it such a good vehicle for scaffolding learning. And the last principle is a flow. Skills and challenges are in balance, and participants are focused on the task and are in tune with each other. Interestingly, then, when my learners have language on the board, as I described in my puzzle, they not only use more simple language, for example, grammatical structures doing the tasks, but also do it faster, the task faster. But when they have an empty board, when the activity starts, it takes them longer to complete the task, but I get them thinking longer, which is very good for the interiorization process. Finishing my presentation, now I can divide my puzzle into 2 parts. First is why the input I provide on the board doesn't become affordances, that is, language learning opportunities that exist in the learner's linguistic environment. And scaffolding metaphor is very powerful here. At the same time, more complicated and more dynamic than simply support. As Meryl Swain put it, one is always aiming at a moving target. Now I think the best way is to give learners something a bit challenging and then work backwards as much as I need to eventually provide enough support for the learners to be able to cope with the task demands. This quote, well, actually combining 2, I found in one of my favorite books. And speaking about the second part of my puzzle, that is why the learners produce much richer language facing an empty board compared with when the board is covered with language. The nature of this difference isn't completely clear-cut for me. I think perhaps one of those assumptions I mentioned in the beginning would shed some light on it. But this is an issue for another research and another presentation. And for those of you who've seen out the rest of the presentation, I have a small present. A funny song about scaffolding by Luke Kelly. Cheers!